This is Amend and Progress, your go-to podcast from Vodori for all things promotional material review. Get ready for actionable insights, valuable perspectives, and best practices to elevate your workflow and team morale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Amend and Progress, Vodori's podcast about the material review process. I'm your host, Annalise, and today we're going to be talking all about digital content reviews. So unpacking why it's so hard to review digital content in today's world and some best practices for making these types of reviews both more efficient and effective. Joining me in the conversation today is Elizabeth Calderon, Customer Success Manager at Vodori. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You came on and did some videos with me related to our benchmark data. So I know there's always lots of insights and perspectives that I know you'll bring to the table today. And especially this digital content topic is, I think, top of mind for a lot of organizations. So super excited to dig into it with you today. Before we get there, let's start with some getting to know you questions. Are you up for it?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's do it. First question, what's your morning beverage of choice?
Definitely coffee, which I'm sure is almost everyone's response. But I tell people that I have coffee with my creamer because I require a lot of specifically vanilla creamer and then coffee. Iced coffee, of course, especially in the summertime, but a lot of vanilla creamer is essential for me.
I love to hear it. No one has talked about creamer today, even though coffee is a popular answer. So, bringing some new perspective there. Second question, what's either your current or favorite hobby?
I would say that I don't have that many hobbies, but if I had to pick one, I'll pick one that I've been pretty consistent on, which is Pilates workout. I discovered it last year. Been pretty consistent since then. I'm almost at my 200th class. I just feel like it's one of the workouts that I have seen a difference, which makes me want to go back. And it's low intensive. You can just sit there, lay down, and still work out. It's great.
I love it. And Pilates, while it's low impact, it's hard. Pilates can be very hard.
It's not fun in the beginning. Your entire body is shaking the entire time. But after your fifth class, you're fine.
Okay. Well, maybe this is the motivation I needed. I feel like I always do one class and it's way too hard. And I'm like, I can't, it's too difficult. But maybe it's this five. I need to break through the five
You got
class
to get
barrier.
through the fifth class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. That's awesome. Okay. Final question. What's one productivity hack or best practice you use in your daily life?
I'll say one. I don't think it's groundbreaking or anything, but it's helped me over the last couple of years. I've used it for years. Is while I can have a list of my priorities for the week, it changes, right? Things come up, meetings get canceled. So what I do at the end of the day, and I always say my day starts the day before, is because before I log off, I create a list for the next day of my focus, my priorities. So when I come in, I already know what my focus is. And obviously that shifts. So just doing that every day before I log off is just helpful for the next day.
What a way to set yourself up for success as you log in the next morning. That mental load you've already tackled that. So I love that. No one has talked about that yet. So you heard it here first. New best practice around the day before being essential for the following day. Love to hear it. All right. Well, thanks for entertaining those. It's just fun to get to know people on a different level. So just appreciate you being up for answering those questions. So
absolutely.
Digital content reviews. I think this is going to be a big, helpful topic for life science companies. We know that digital content creation is definitely a priority for a lot of organizations, but it can be difficult to review and approve it quickly, efficiently. There's a lot of factors that go into this. And so I'm curious, as your sort of role as a customer success manager, you're talking to our customers on a day-to-day basis about how to improve their process. Is this coming up with the customers that you're talking to? And what is sort of generally what's being said from our customers about digital content reviews?
Yeah, I would say it's coming up more and more over the especially last couple of years. And I think the biggest struggle for my customers and the things that they've shared are how to improve their web review process with static PDFs. And once they have a system, how do they improve that? Because a lot of life science organizations, I feel, are very used to the static PDFs, which then reviewers are missing a lot of context, the interactivity that they're not seeing with the PDFs. So I think my customers and what we've heard at Vodori, they're branching out of the norm and trying to improve the web review process, but it just seems like there's not a lot of resources for them.
And certainly there's all different types of digital content too that they're dealing with, right? Of course, websites, as you mentioned, any apps. I think like even social content could potentially fall under this realm. It's just content that needs to be created quickly that has these interactive elements like links and things like that that just provide complexity to the process that can be difficult to handle. And so you mentioned those types of things. So especially for web content reviews, interactive elements, buttons, that type of thing. Where are the other challenges when it comes to digital content review? What makes this so hard for those that even have a system or don't have a system for reviewing and improving content?
Good question. There was a study that in 2017, 2018, life science organizations invested billions of dollars. I think it was a crazy number, like $12 billion on digital health ventures. But like I said, there's few resources that actually exist for life science organizations to improve, optimize their review and approval process for their digital content, because the strategies that are there for optimizing the review and approval process are just primarily focused on static materials. So it leaves our customers, life science organizations, at a loss for how to improve their web review process and their internal procedures, because in the case for MLR review, the digital content is typically created as static PDFs. And even that process alone for creating the PDFs, annotating the PDFs are pretty time and labor intensive for all parties, the initiators collecting the digital content themselves and having to annotate that with the substantiating claims, or sometimes they have their agencies that are responsible for collecting and annotating the screenshots. And sometimes, in rare occasions, they skip the PDFs altogether and then they review these web changes live in person, which, as you can imagine, is also time intensive, because prepping for the calls, the conversations that can happen, the back and forth that can happen in that meeting with all of the changes that they need to make.
Yeah. And I imagine too, if you've been doing web content reviews or digital content reviews a certain way for so long, a new way, there's some change management that has to go on. You're sort of learning a new way to review and approve content. And that, of course, comes with its own set of challenges as well. So, you started to talk a little bit about some of the, we think about digital content review being the review and approval, but certainly there's an element of this that comes before that I'm curious if you talk to customers about. We have talked a lot about content quality on the podcast in the past, in terms of this being a big priority for organizations, because these are the words of other guests on the podcast, not mine, but it's sort of this garbage in, garbage out scenario where if the quality of the content you're putting in is not great, the review process is not going to go well. And then of course you're left with not great content. So talk me through some maybe best practices or considerations that organizations can think about to improve the quality of the content, the quality of the digital content they're submitting, or like other prep activities that make the review process go smoother.
I'll say a couple of things with that. The first and foremost, as you can imagine, in the beginning stages, setting clear process guidelines upfront. I think life science organizations can really benefit from having clear internal process guidelines that'll help foster strong intercommunication and also having clear expectations among the team. So some of those process guidelines could include first identifying and of course sharing it with the team, but how often is web content, how often is it going to change? Having those expectations up front. What's the expected turnaround time for the web reviews? Which specific members are responsible for reviewing digital content? Does that change depending on the type of website? You know, patient versus HCP. Does it depend on specific sections of the website? The other things to consider are what types of changes come through in those digital content, and identifying if you really require your full MLR team to review, maybe just if you're just reviewing a section of the website, do you really need to loop in your entire MLR team? Or if you're just making minor changes in your website, again, do you require your full MLR team to review? So consider having an expedited review process or an expedited revision process. And then also identifying at what stage do you want your review team to be looped in. So identifying those scenarios, capturing those, create a guideline, a process guideline, and then sharing that and communicating that with your team that's responsible for the web review.
Anything else on content quality, or is it really more about, you know, obviously your purview is going to be more about like process, but like what else is helpful for the reviewer to know, to be aware of going into the review process of digital content that you've seen help with just the overall process in general?
I would say as best practice, looping in the key parties sooner when you're reviewing, or when you have the concept deliverables, reviewing that with your entire MLR team. Because when you start including them very early on, you create more team alignment. A streamline review can occur when that content is ready for that final approval. So when they get the PDF, the reviewers aren't asking so many questions on what does this mean? What is the annotation here? What does this interactivity mean? It kind of reduces that.
Expectations are set, there's alignment early on, and there's been communication so that as a reviewer, I'm getting something that I at least have a sense of what the purpose or the intent or the target audience. So I can imagine that's going to be super helpful information. Also extremely helpful if you're working with an agency on concept review things as well, especially as we think about like resource, time, and money being spent. If we can align on a concept early with an agency, that can potentially make the review process go smoother. So I think that those are really important considerations to remember. Let's move to the review process itself. So we've talked a little bit about, here's some things to set yourself up for success for digital content review. Let's say the content is high quality. There's alignment, all these things that you talked about have been happening. The content gets to review. What helps the process go well? What are some good best practices? What do you see our customers do today that makes the review process go well?
I would say creating a checklist specifically for reviewers on things that you want to make sure that they don't miss. So that when reviewers get this content, they already have a checklist. Like, let me check this off as I'm reviewing this particular content page, whatever it might be. So for the purpose of this call, I pulled up Vodori's web content review checklist. So we've categorized it in buckets to help our reviewers, especially for reviewers that aren't that familiar with reviewing digital content. So we've categorized it by content, images, brand, design and accessibility, functionality, with line items for each, like functionality, making sure that the web page passes speed tests. Web page looks correct across multiple supported browsers. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that reviewers have to make sure that they don't miss, and this just makes it easier for them. So creating a checklist, or just, take a look at ours. We've already created it that we've shared with customers that I think reviewers particularly find it very easy.
A beautiful plug for the checklist. I do think it is incredible. Even if you use it as a starting point, I think is just like a great asset to leverage. So I'll include that in the show notes for today. So if folks are interested in checking out that checklist, please visit the show notes for the link. Perfect. What else? What are some other best practices that help the review process? Talk me through maybe a couple more.
If you have the resources, leverage a software to streamline the process. There are purpose-built web review software options where you can annotate and add commentary directly on the websites and in the interactive elements, which help the reviewers and they don't go back to you as the initiator asking clarifying questions around what does this annotation mean? Where are you pointing this to? The interactive elements, it's clarified if you can just include those directly on the website that they're reviewing. I think a lot of our reviewers have struggled with the PDFs and the annotations and the interactive elements altogether. So if you can leverage a software.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I'm curious to get your thoughts too on just like general feedback. But to your point, if you're using software to help with the process, I can imagine where something could go wrong with this is a comment is left on a static PDF and the content creator is not totally sure what the comment is about. If you're using software where you can actually click on the button and say, adjust the color or the copy or whatever the feedback is, there's just continued clarity around the feedback there that of course makes any sort of feedback loops faster and more efficient and just clearer for the whole team. But I imagine there's a lot of feedback for digital content. As a marketer myself, it's usually people have a lot of feedback, and sometimes it's color, sometimes that are things that are, maybe not entirely content focused. Anything you talk about our customers with in terms of the feedback piece specifically, how to make feedback clear, concise, or just like beneficial so that those feedback rounds are fast and there's a lot of clarity around it?
Yeah, I think I get this question asked a lot by our customers because when there is a piece of content where you have a lot of annotations, as an initiator, do you go one by one and determine, is this required or is this optional? Do we need to hop on an MLR meeting to discuss this annotation? So it is very time consuming for the initiator, the agency, whoever's preparing this piece. So I've walked through with some of my customers to create an annotation color process. And some of our customers have included 2 colors to keep it easy. If you're a reviewer and you leave a red annotation, that red annotation is mandatory. That's not up for debate. We're not discussing it. That needs to be a change that needs to happen. And me as a reviewer, when I get the most up-to-date piece, I will know that my red annotations have been addressed versus blue annotations. Those are suggested. So as a reviewer, I will understand if I get the piece again, those were not mandatory. So I might not see those changes implemented in the new version. So that helps the initiators when they're looking through the very many annotations. These are the red, these are the ones that need to be addressed. And also for the reviewers, when they get the new piece with the changes, they'll understand why some changes haven't been addressed. So that just clarifies everything for every party.
Yeah, I love it. Using color to almost create this system of clarity and prioritization too, especially for those that are responsible for the feedback consolidation. I can at least know, okay, I know how to prioritize this next round or working with the agency or whatever the case may be. So I love that. Always, systems, even if it's just color coding, can be super helpful. This has been incredibly helpful, Elizabeth. I think, again, we're hearing about digital content review woes a lot, and I think there's obviously great solutions to help companies. But let's say you're an organization who's just like, oh my gosh, my digital content review process is just a total mess, and I need to do something tomorrow to improve the process for my team. What would be like one thing that you would advise them on, or one best practice you would want to leave that organization with as a baby step to improve digital content review?
I would say it all starts in the beginning. And like I said, creating a process guideline. So if you want to start and you're starting from scratch, identifying some of those questions of how often web content is going to change, which reviewers are required to review this web content, just so that you even have an understanding as the person that's trying to create this process of what do we need? What resources do we have? What should I share with my review team? So just starting there, and then you'll see that you'll start taking the other steps.
I love it. Back to basics, back to the beginning of your process fundamentals to drive success in these areas. I love it, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. A perfect way to end the episode today. Thank you so much for your time and perspective. I know digital content is an ongoing conversation, so can totally see you coming back on to share even more insights in the future. So thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And folks, the conversation doesn't stop here. Please follow Vodori on LinkedIn for updates on new episodes, ask us questions. We'd love to hear any feedback on the Amend and Progress episodes to date. You can subscribe to Amend and Progress on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review the show. Until next time, this is Annalise signing off for Amend and Progress. Have a fantastic day.